He kicked his wife out to save his company. Not a stranger, not a business partner he had just met, not someone he barely knew. His wife, the woman who loved him, the woman who believed in him when nobody else did, the woman who opened doors for him that he could not have opened himself, the woman who funded his dreams, built his future, and stood beside him when he had nothing but talent and ambition. He kicked her out. He stood in a boardroom full of people who were watching, and he pointed at her, and he said words that no husband should ever say to a wife, and she left. She walked out of that building. She walked out of a company that she had built with her own money, her own vision, her own family name. And now she was gone. The boardroom relaxed, the shareholders smiled, the company was safe, he was in control. Or so he thought. Because here is what he forgot. Here is the one thing, the single, critical, fatal thing, that he forgot in all his planning and all his calculating, and all his scheming to get her out of the company he had convinced himself was his. He forgot to check who actually owned it. He forgot the papers, the original papers, the ones that were signed before the money moved, before the museum opened, before any of it started. The ones that said, in very clear and very legal language, exactly who the true owner was. And when she walked back in, when she walked back through those doors with a folder full of documents and a lawyer at her side, and the expression of a woman who has been patient for long enough, the whole story changed. This is a story about art and money and love that was real on one side and fake on the other. It is a story about a man who had everything handed to him and used it to destroy the person who handed it. It is a story about what greed costs, not the dramatic movie version cost, but the real cost. The kind that arrives slowly like a tide and leaves you completely empty. And it is a story about a woman who walked out of a room and came back 10 times stronger. Stay right here. Do not go anywhere. Because what happens when that door opens again is something you are not prepared for. Like this video right now if you believe that what goes around always comes around. Subscribe to Tribal Tales Hub, hit that bell, every notification, every story. Comment below, have you ever helped someone who used that help against you? Tell us. We are reading everything. His name was Emeka Osai. He was born in 1994 in a small flat in the Surulere area of Lagos, a 2-room apartment on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades, where the paint on the outside walls was telling its own story of time and weather, and where the staircase light had not worked since the year Emeka was born, and nobody had fixed it because nobody in the building had the time or the money to care about a staircase light. His father was named Femi Osai. His mother was named Bolus Osai, and they were, by any material measure, struggling, but they were struggling in a very specific and dignified way that was different from simply being poor. They were artists, both of them. His father painted large, bold, expressive canvases that filled the sitting room of the small flat and spilled into the bedroom and leaned against every available wall, waiting for a world that was perpetually about to discover them, but somehow never quite did. His mother sculpted small, intricate pieces made from clay and metal scraps and found objects, which she sold occasionally at Lekki Arts Market on weekends for amounts that felt significant on the day and proved insufficient by the following Tuesday. They were not bitter about this. This is important to understand. Femi and Bolus Osai were not people who felt the world owed them recognition for their talent. They were people who genuinely, in their bones, loved making things, loved the specific act of taking a blank surface or a lump of clay and making something from it that had not existed before. The love was real. The passion was real. The only thing that was not sufficient was the income. So Femi drove a taxi on weekdays, and Bolus did alterations and clothing repairs for a seamstress in their building. And on the weekends they made art, and they talked about art, and they filled their small flat with art and with the kind of conversation that happens between two people who are fluent in the same language and who use that language constantly, because it is the truest thing they have. Emeka grew up in this world. He grew up surrounded by canvas and clay and the smell of paint and the sound of his parents talking about composition and color and form in the same tone that other families talked about groceries and traffic. He grew up watching his father stand at a canvas for an hour without touching it, just looking, just seeing something that nobody else in the room could see yet. He grew up watching his mother's hands work clay with a certainty that seemed effortless from the outside, and that he would later understand was the product of 10,000 hours of practice. He was good at art from the very beginning. Not good in the way that children are generally good at drawing when their parents are artists and they grow up around the materials. Most children in that environment develop a comfort with the tools but not necessarily the talent. Emeka had something extra. He had his father's eye, the ability to see a composition before it existed, to understand how light and space and color would interact before they did. And he had his mother's hands, the precision, the patience, the willingness to work a surface until it was exactly right rather than approximately right. He was 8 years old when his father sat beside him and looked at a painting Emeka had made, a small thing, on a piece of cardboard with the limited palette of a child's art box, and was quiet for a long time. "Emeka," his father said. "Yes, Papa." "Who taught you to do this?" Emeka looked at the painting. "You," he said. "I watched you." Femi picked up the cardboard and held it toward the light from the window. He looked at the way his 8-year-old son had rendered shadow, the way the light fell in the painting, with a logic and a feeling that most adult art students struggled to achieve. He put the cardboard down carefully. "Your mother needs to see this," he said. They showed Bolus. She held the cardboard the same way toward the light, turning it slightly, reading it the way you read something that requires full attention. She said quietly, "He sees it." That was all she said, but between her and Femi it was everything. Seeing it, the ability to perceive light and space and relationship the way an artist perceives them, was the fundamental thing. The techniques could be taught, the hand could be trained, but seeing it was either there or it wasn't, and in their son's case, at 8 years old, it was there in a way that both his parents understood immediately and completely. From that day, his training was intentional. His father showed him everything he knew about painting, not as a teacher with a student, as an artist with an apprentice, which is a different and more serious relationship. He showed him how to stretch a canvas, how to prepare a surface, how to mix color from first principles rather than from a tube, how to understand the way different pigments behave in different lights. He showed him how to look at a subject for a long time before touching the canvas, because the looking was half the work. His mother showed him sculpture, how to read a material's nature, how to understand what it wanted to be rather than imposing on it what you wanted it to become. She showed him patience. She showed him that the best work came from the intersection of intention and surrender. You had an idea, you pursued it, and somewhere in the middle you let the material speak and you listened. Emeka was 12 when he entered his first competition. It was a school art competition, Lagos State secondary school level, nothing prestigious in the wider world but taken seriously within the ecosystem it belonged to. Emeka entered a painting. It was 3 times the size of any other entry in his category, and it took the judges, a panel of 4 art professionals brought in from the National Gallery, an unusually long time to process. He won. He won by a margin that was not close. His parents were at the prize giving. His father sat with his hands in his lap, and the expression of a man containing something very large. His mother cried. They were proud in the specific way that parents are proud when their child succeeds at the thing that is also the truest thing in the family. The pride that is not just about the child but about the legacy, the validation of everything the parents have built. After the prize giving, in the corridor outside the hall, Emeka's father put his hand on his son's shoulder. "You have something real," he said. "You know that." "Yes, Papa." Real is not the same as easy, his father said. Real just means the foundation is solid. What you build on it is your choice. Emeka nodded. I'm going to build something big, he said. He was 12. He meant it completely. He had no idea yet how it would happen or how complicated the path would be or what it would cost him, but the certainty was there. The bone-level certainty that he had inherited from both his parents, modified by his own particular version of ambition. He won every competition he entered for the next 4 years. Secondary school was the time when Emeka's reputation, quiet but real, circulating through the circles of Lagos's art and education world, began to form. Teachers noticed. Other students noticed. He was not celebrated loudly in the way that athletes were celebrated, because art competitions did not fill sports stadiums and his victories did not make the general school assembly announcements. But in the specific world where art was taken seriously, his name circulated. This circulation reached, eventually, the ears of people who were paying attention for their own reasons. One of those people was a woman named Adiz Nwasu. But Adiz Nwasu is the next chapter of this story, and before we get to her, we need to understand one more important thing about Emeka Osai. He wanted money. Not in the way that everyone wants money, not as a comfortable background desire for security and comfort. He wanted it specifically and urgently, and in a way that was connected always to the 2-room flat in Surulere and the staircase light that never worked in the taxi his father drove and the alterations his mother sewed. He wanted money the way a person wants oxygen when they have been without it, as the thing whose absence had defined everything and whose presence would change everything. This desire was not wrong. It was completely understandable. It was the natural response of a child who watched his parents sacrifice their whole artistic lives on the altar of basic survival, and who had decided from very young that he was not going to do the same. But desire, in large enough quantities, without the right guidance, has a way of making decisions for you. And Emeka Osai's desire for money would eventually make a decision that he would spend a long time wishing he could unmake. He did not know this yet. At 16, at the end of secondary school, winning competitions and preparing for what came next, he was simply a talented boy from Surulere with paint on his hands and a very clear idea of how much he wanted things to be different. The Lagos art world that he had been operating in the secondary school level, the junior competitions, the small galleries that showed student work, had a ceiling. He could see the ceiling. He knew that to go beyond it, he needed training that was beyond what his parents could give him and beyond what any institution in his current orbit could provide. He needed a proper art school, the kind with real faculty and real facilities and real connections to the international art world, the kind that cost money his family did not have. He applied anyway. He applied to the Yaba College of Art and Design, YABATCH, as it was universally known, on the strength of a portfolio that he spent 3 months assembling. Every piece he included had been selected and sequenced with the care of someone who understood that the portfolio was an argument, and that arguments had to be constructed, not just assembled. He wrote a statement of purpose that he rewrote 11 times, each version getting closer to what he actually meant, until the 11th version said it simply and truly. He was accepted. The scholarship he received covered 60% of the fees. The remaining 40% was a number that his parents looked at together, at the kitchen table, and then looked at each other, and then, without speaking very much about it, began finding. His father took a second shift with the taxi. His mother added 3 more alteration clients. A cousin in Abuja sent something. A church member who had heard about the scholarship contributed something small. It took 4 months, but they found the money. Emeka went to YABTCH. He studied painting and fine art. He was, from his first semester, the most talked about student in his cohort, Not because he was difficult or demanding, he was neither, but because his work was simply on a different level. His tutors noticed. His peers noticed. The notice was not always comfortable. Some of his peers resented it, which was natural, and Emeka navigated this with the specific combination of social intelligence and focused indifference that he had learned in secondary school. He did not need everyone to like him. He needed to get better. He got better. Every semester better. His painting evolved from the technically impressive work of a precocious teenager into something with genuine depth. Work that was not just skillful, but that had a point of view. That was saying something about the Lagos he had grown up in, and the Nigeria he was living in, and the specific texture of being alive in this place at this time. And it was in his second year at YABATCH that he first noticed Adiz Nwasu. Or rather, because this is how it actually happened, Adiz Nwasu first noticed him. Her full name was Adiz Chisom Nwasu. She was born in 1993 in Enugu, the first child of Dr. Chukwuemeka Nwasu and Mrs. Chidinma Nwasu, a couple whose wealth was not the aggressive, recent wealth of people who had made money quickly in oil or contracts, but the quiet, established wealth of a family that had been comfortable for 3 generations. The Nwasu family's money had come originally from trade, import-export, largely, her great-grandfather having been one of the early Lagos traders who understood the post-colonial economy well enough to position himself correctly, and had been grown and diversified over the decades until it was the kind of money that no longer needed tending in obvious ways. It simply was. It had accumulated the gravity of age and was now just a fact of the family's existence, like the family name itself. Her father was a doctor, a cardiologist with a private practice in Enugu and consulting positions at 2 teaching hospitals. He was 60 when Adiz was born, which made him a late father and an indulgent one in the specific way of men who have waited a long time for a child and who cannot quite bring themselves to deny them anything significant. Her mother was 42 at Adiz's birth, also late, also devoted, also prone to the particular parental indulgence of people who had not been certain they would have a child, and who therefore received the child with a gratitude that shaped everything. Adiz grew up knowing she was loved and knowing she was wealthy. These were simply facts of her world, like the weather, present, consistent, unremarkable in their constancy. The Enugu house was large. The cars were good. The schools were expensive. The holidays were international, not flashily international. The Nwosus were not people who made performance of their money, but consistently international, a week here, 2 weeks there, the world as a thing you visited rather than imagined. She was intelligent, sharp in a way that was different from Emeka's intelligence. Where his was perceptive and creative, hers was analytical and strategic. She understood systems quickly. She understood incentives. She understood what motivated people and how those motivations could be arranged to produce desired outcomes. She was, as a teenager, already the kind of person who looked at a situation from the outside and understood its architecture in the time it took others to simply experience it. She did not like art. This is crucial to understand. She had grown up surrounded by art. Her family's wealth had expressed itself, over the generations, partly through art collection, and the Enugu house had pieces on the walls that would not have been out of place in a proper gallery. She had been taken to exhibitions and museums and gallery openings since she was old enough to walk. She had been educated about periods and movements and names that mattered. But she did not love it the way her parents did, the way her grandparents had. Art, for Adiz, was not a passion. It was an industry, one she understood well, whose economics she had studied with the detached attention of someone assessing an opportunity rather than engaging with a culture. And the art industry, she had concluded by the time she was 17, was an industry with a very specific problem. The problem was the gap between talent and market. Artists, genuine, talented, remarkable artists, existed all over Nigeria, in Lagos and Enugu and Port Harcourt and Abuja and smaller cities and villages. Talent was not the scarce thing. What was scarce was the infrastructure to connect that talent to the buyers who would pay serious money for it. The galleries that existed were either too small to matter internationally or too established to take risks on new voices. The international market was largely inaccessible to Nigerian artists because the bridge, the institutional, reputational marketing bridge, did not exist. Adiz wanted to build it. Not from artistic passion, from business conviction. She had run the numbers in her head and they were, to her analytical eye, extremely good numbers. The Nigerian art market was undervalued by international standards. The talent pool was deep. The growing Nigerian middle class and the diaspora community represented a domestic and international buyer base that was waiting for the right institutional vehicle to reach it. The margins in art sales were extraordinary compared to most businesses. The brand value of a successful art institution compounded over time in ways that most businesses could not match. She needed one thing. She needed the artist. Not just any artist, the right artist. The kind who could anchor an institution's reputation, who produced work at a level that commanded serious money, who was unknown enough to be developed on her terms but talented enough to actually be worth developing. She went to YABATCH on this mission. She enrolled in an art appreciation and history program, not a full degree, a certificate program designed for collectors and cultural professionals, which gave her legitimate access to the institution and its ecosystem without requiring her to pretend she was pursuing a career in art. She was strategic even about this. She attended lectures. She attended student exhibitions. She watched student competitions. She was looking for the artist. She found him in a competition in the third month of her program. She was sitting in the gallery space that YABATCH used for its internal competitions, watching students present work for a year-end prize. She had her notebook. She kept notes on every artist she was evaluating, a private scoring system based on technical quality, originality, marketability, and what she called presence, which was the ineffable quality of work that made you stop rather than walk past. She had seen 32 pieces when Emeka Osai's canvas was brought into the room. She stopped writing. The painting was large, larger than the standard competition format, and it showed a Lagos street scene. But it was not a documentary or a realistic image. It had been transformed. The colors were hyperreal. The light was doing something that real light did not do. The figures in the street were both specific and symbolic simultaneously. It was a painting that worked on multiple levels, and that required multiple readings to fully understand, and each reading revealed something new. She looked at it for 4 minutes without moving. Then she looked at the artist. Emeka Osai was 20 years old. He was standing at a slight angle to his painting, not presenting it, just present with it, in the specific way of an artist who has said what needed to be said and is now simply waiting. He was not performing confidence. He simply had it. He won the competition by a margin that was not close. Adiz did not approach him that day. She watched him receive the prize, shake hands, respond to the questions from the judges. She watched how he spoke, clearly, directly, without the nervous energy that characterized most student artists when they were asked to discuss their work. He had a vocabulary for what he did. He understood it. She approached him 1 week later. She found him in the studio space. He had a small section of the student studio that he used on afternoons, after his morning lectures. She knocked on the door frame and he looked up from the canvas he was working on. "You won last week," she said. He looked at her. He had seen her in the competition space. He noticed people who paid attention the way she had paid attention. "Yes," he said. "My name is Adiz Nwasu." She did not say the family name in the way of someone expecting recognition, which was itself a kind of sophistication. "I'm in the appreciation program. I've been watching the student exhibitions." "I know," he said. She looked at him. "I've seen you," he said. "You take notes on everyone." She smiled. It was a small smile, real, not performed. "I'm looking for something specific." "What?" "The right artist," she said, "for a project I'm developing." He put down the brush he was holding. He gave her his full attention, not because she was striking, though she was, but because the words she had said had a weight to them that required full attention. "Tell me about the project," he said. She told him. She sat on the only other chair in the small studio space, and she described what she had been planning for 2 years. The museum, the institution, the bridge between Nigerian art and the international market, the business model, the revenue streams, the sales commission structure, the exhibition program, the donor and patron cultivation strategy. She described it the way she had developed it, as a business with a cultural product, not as a cultural institution that happened to have business aspects. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "And you need the artist." "I need the right artist," she said. "The anchor, the name that the institution builds its initial reputation around. The artist whose work is good enough that serious international buyers come to see it, which means they come to the institution, which means the institution has an audience." "And you think I'm that artist?" he said. She looked at him steadily. "I think you might be," she said. "I've seen 4 months of student work here, and I've seen your competition entry, and I've seen 3 of your other pieces from the archive. You might be." He was quiet for a moment. "And the structure," he said. "If I'm the anchor artist, what am I getting?" She had prepared for this. She explained the profit split, 70% to her, 30% to him, from the institution's revenues. She explained the funding. She had capital, family capital, enough to build and launch and sustain for 2 years without needing external investment. She explained what she needed from him: his art, his participation in building the institution's program, his name. He said, 30% of a successful museum is better than 100% of nothing. "Yes," she said. "And if it fails?" "Then we've both lost something," she said. "I've lost money, you've lost time, but I don't think it's going to fail." He looked at her. She was serious. She was specific. She was not a dreamer, she was a planner, and he could see the planning in everything she had said, the way it had depth and detail that improvisation did not produce. "I'm going to think about it," he said. "Take a week," she said. She stood up. She gave him a card, a plain white card with her name and number. 1 week. She left. Emeka sat in the studio after she went, and he thought about the conversation. He thought about it from every angle, the way his father had taught him to think about paintings, from the left, from the right, from close up, from far away. He thought, this is money. He thought serious money, not competition prize money, not gallery sale money. Institution money, museum money, the kind of money that built things that lasted. He thought 70-30 is not equal. He thought, but she has the capital and the plan and the family name and the business experience. You have the talent. 70-30 on a successful institution is a different number from 70-30 sounds. He thought, agree to it. He called her on the 5th day. "I'm in," he said. "Good," she said. "Let's meet to go over the contract." The contract was signed 6 weeks later, after Emeka had read it 3 times and asked his father to read it once. His father, who knew nothing about contracts but who was a careful reader, had noted the profit split and the ownership structure and had said, quietly, "Emeka, this woman owns 70% of this business." "I know," Emeka said. "And you're okay with that?" "For now," Emeka said. For now, that phrase would matter later. The institution they built together was called the Os Yenwasu Art Foundation. The name was her suggestion, and he had agreed to it, and the agreement said something about where each of them was in the relationship at that point. She was thinking about branding. He was thinking about art. Both of them were thinking about money, but from different angles. The museum opened in Lagos. in a space in Victoria Island that Adiz had found and leased through one of her family's property contacts. It was not a large space when they started, but it was the right space, clean, well lit, in a neighborhood where the buyers they were targeting already spent their time. Adiz had spent 3 months before the opening building what she called the pre-launch list, a carefully curated collection of collectors, corporate buyers, international art consultants, gallery owners, and cultural journalists who would receive invitations to the opening and who represented, she had calculated, a potential buyer pool of genuine significance. Emeka had spent those same 3 months making paintings. He made 14 new pieces for the opening exhibition. He worked with the focused intensity of someone who understood that this was the moment, that the launch was the first impression, and the first impression was, in the business of art, worth more than almost anything that came after. He had always worked hard. In this period, he worked at another level. He was at the studio from 7 in the morning. He was still there at midnight. He woke up thinking about the work. He went to sleep thinking about it. The paintings he produced were extraordinary. They were the best work of his young life, technically accomplished in a way that reflected everything he had learned, but also emotionally and conceptually deeper than anything he had produced before. They were about Lagos, about Surulere, about his parents' flat and the staircase light, and the smell of paint, and the specific beauty of a life lived in art without financial reward. They were about being 21 years old in a city of 20 million people, and knowing you had something, and not yet knowing how far it would go. The opening night was a full house. Adiz had executed the pre-launch list with the precision of a military operation. Every person she had targeted had been personally invited, personally followed up, personally engaged in the weeks before. The catering was excellent. The lighting was perfect. She had hired a lighting designer from London who had done 3 major gallery openings and who understood that light in a gallery space was not decoration but argument. The sequence of the exhibition was designed to create a journey. You entered the room and each piece led you to the next, and by the time you reached the largest, central canvas, you had been prepared for it. The largest canvas sold on opening night, for more money than Emeka's parents had made in 2 years combined. He stood in the corner of the room, glass of water in his hand. He did not drink at events. He wanted to be present, and he watched the number being written on the sales sheet, and he felt something move through him that was so large he had no word for it. Not just happiness, not just relief. Something that had been waiting inside him since he was 8 years old, looking at his father's unsold paintings leaning against the walls, since he was 12 looking at a tin of money on the kitchen table, since he was 16 watching his mother sew other people's clothes so he could go to school. Something that felt like a rival. He called his parents that night from the museum. His father answered. "Papa," he said, "the large painting sold." His father was quiet for a moment. "How much?" he said. Emeka told him. His father put the phone down. Emeka heard him call his mother's name. He heard her come to the room. He heard his father tell her the number. He heard his mother make a sound that he had not heard from her before, a sound that was beyond ordinary happiness, beyond ordinary pride, the sound of a woman who had given everything she had to make a thing happen and was now hearing that it had happened. He held the phone and listened to his parents in their small Surulere flat on the other end of the line, and he knew that this was the right thing, that this was the thing that was supposed to happen. He was right that it was the right thing. He was wrong about who he was doing it with. The months after the opening were months of genuine momentum. The foundation had made real money on its first night. The following 2 months built on that. Sales, commissions, corporate partnerships, a write-up in a Lagos business publication that led to a meeting with a collector in London who flew to Lagos specifically to see the collection. Adiz managed all of this with a precision that was remarkable to watch. She was in her element, completely in her element, doing exactly what she had planned to do and doing it at a level that demonstrated that the plan was not just good on paper but executable in reality. Emeka made more work. He exhibited new pieces every quarter. He developed his practice during this period in ways that were unexpected, working with new materials, new scales, new subjects. He was, in the pressure and the energy of a real institution with real stakes, becoming a better artist than he had been before. And somewhere in all of this, in the long evenings after the museum closed, and they were reviewing the day's sales and planning the next quarter's exhibition, somewhere in the working and the building and the shared investment in a thing they were making together, Adiz began to feel something she had not included in the plan. She fell in love with him. This was not part of the plan. She had designed the partnership professionally. She had selected him for the right professional reasons. Love had not been a variable in any of her calculations, but it arrived anyway, the way things arrive when you have spent enough time with a person in circumstances that matter. It arrived gradually, and then completely, the way water fills a vessel. She told herself it was proximity. She told herself it was the intensity of the work. She told herself many things that were attempts to put a manageable frame around something unmanageable. And then one evening, reviewing a catalog draft in the foundation's small office, she simply said, "Emeka, I have feelings for you." He looked up from the catalog. She was looking at him directly. No performance, no calculation, just the bare honesty of someone who has decided to say the true thing. He looked at her for a moment, and then he smiled, a warm smile, a smile that she later understood was practiced rather than spontaneous, but that in that moment felt completely real. "I have feelings for you too," he said. This was not entirely a lie. He was attracted to her. She was a striking woman, intelligent and capable in ways that he genuinely respected. But what he felt was not what she felt. What she felt was love, specific, vulnerable, real love that had arrived despite her intentions. What he felt was something different. The recognition that this moment was significant, that her feelings for him changed the strategic landscape, that being in a relationship with the person who owned 70% of the institution he was building was a different situation from being a contracted partner. He told himself this was not cynical. He told himself it could be real. He told himself that relationships had started from less. He told himself many things. They began the relationship. They were careful about it publicly. The foundation's reputation was built on professionalism, and they did not want the narrative to become a story about personal relationships. But within their world, their people knew. And within 3 months, it was simply understood that Emeka Osai and Adiz Nwasu were together. She was happy in a way that people who have been careful for a long time are happy when they finally allow themselves to stop being careful. She brought to the relationship the same focused attention she brought to the business. When she loved completely. And the completeness of her love was the thing that Emeka both benefited from and, somewhere he did not examine very often, took advantage of. She introduced him to her parents. Dr. Nwasu and Mrs. Nwasu received him in their Enugu home, a large, quiet house full of the art that 3 generations of Nwosus had collected. Dr. Nwasu, 67 at this point, was a man who read people quickly and well, with the diagnostic eye of a doctor applied to social situations. He looked at Emeka Osai carefully, and he saw talent and ambition and charm. He also saw something else, something he could not name precisely, a quality in the eyes when they thought they were not being watched, and he filed this something else in the part of his mind where he kept things that required monitoring. He told his wife that night, "He is very talented." She said, "And?" He was quiet for a moment. "And he loves our daughter's position more than he loves our daughter." She looked at him. "You can see that." "I've been seeing it for 40 years, he said. "In patients who say they want to be well but don't really. The eyes always tell you the truth." He said nothing to Adiz. She was happy and the happiness was real, and he was not going to be the person who took it from her based on a suspicion. He would watch and he would wait and he would hope sincerely that he was wrong. He was not wrong, but the wrongness took time to become visible. The proposal came 18 months into the relationship. Emeka proposed at the foundation, at the opening of a new exhibition, in front of the collected guests, which was a choice that contained within it a specific understanding of what the moment would do to Adiz's public narrative and therefore to the foundation's public narrative. He proposed with a ring that he had bought with his commission income. Not the most expensive ring in the world, but chosen well. And she received it with tears that were completely real and happiness that was completely real and yes, that was completely real. They married in 2018. A large wedding, her family's social circle was extensive, and the Nwasu name required a certain scale of celebration. Emeka's parents came and sat in the front row, Femi, in a suit he had bought specifically for the occasion, Bolus in the most beautiful dress she had owned, both of them watching their son marry into a world they had dreamed of from a circular flat without ever quite being able to picture the specifics. After the wedding, the business accelerated. Because now it was a family business. Now the Nwasu Art Foundation was the foundation of a marriage, not just a professional partnership. Adiz invested more. The foundation expanded, a second location in Abuja in partnership with a government cultural program. International exhibitions in London and New York, where the foundation's name and Emeka's work began to gain the kind of traction that changes the category. Corporate sponsorships, a private patron program. Revenue streams that, 3 years after the opening, were generating numbers that neither of them had put in the original projections. They were making money, real money, significant money. Emeka's 30% of the foundation's revenues was now, in absolute terms, a very large number. He was buying things, a car, an apartment in Victoria Island, things he had wanted since he was 8 years old standing in front of a glass front shop. He was also, and this was where the story began to turn, looking at the 30% and thinking about the 70%. He was making 30, she was making 70 of the same thing. Of the thing his talent had built, of the institution that his paintings had anchored and his name had launched and his work had sustained. 70-30 had felt like a good deal when he was a student, and she was the one with the capital and the plan. Now, 4 years in, with the foundation worth what it was worth, 70-30 felt like a different thing. He began talking to people, quietly, carefully. He began asking questions about the ownership structure of the foundation, about what it would take to change it, about the legal landscape of an art institution like this and who had what rights. What he found was this: the original incorporation documents were very clear. Adiz Nwasu owned 70% of the Nwasu Art Foundation. Not 70% of the revenues, 70% of the institution itself. The shares, the assets, the governance. She was the majority shareholder. She was, in any legal confrontation, the majority voice. He was not the owner. He had never been the owner. He had been the talent. The recognition of this, the full, clear recognition of it, which arrived differently at 26 than it had at 20, did something to him that he tried to manage and could not quite manage. It fed the part of him that had always been afraid of ending up like his father, talented and unrecognized and driving a taxi on weekdays. It merged with the part of him that had grown up watching money determine everything. What school you went to, what food you ate, what light worked on your staircase. It merged with the ambition that had been his engine since he was 12 years old. And it produced a plan. A bad plan. A plan that he told himself was simply business, but that was, in reality, something much worse. The plan took 4 months to execute. It began with a conversation, several conversations, strategically placed, with people who moved in the foundation's professional orbit. Whispers, essentially. The specific kind of whispers that the art world, like all worlds where reputation is currency, takes very seriously. The whisper was this: some of the paintings in the Foundation's collection were not original. Not all of them. Not a blanket accusation that would be too easily disproven. Some of them. Specifically, whispers that certain pieces attributed to emerging Nigerian artists that the Foundation had been selling at high prices might be work produced by anonymous studio artists in other countries and passed off as authentic. The Foundation's curation, the whispers suggested, was not as rigorous as it claimed. These whispers were not true. Every piece in the Foundation's collection was authentic. Adi's curation standards were rigorous. She had inherited an understanding of authentication from 3 generations of Enugu art collecting, and she had applied it without compromise. The Foundation's reputation was built on exactly this: the certainty that what you bought there was what it claimed to be. The whispers were designed to destroy that certainty. Emeka had not spread the whispers himself. He was too careful for that. He had spoken to a man, a consultant who operated in the gray areas between gallery work and market manipulation, a person who existed in every industry and whose services were available if you knew how to find them. This man had spread the whispers. Emeka had paid him from a private account. The Foundation's board, which had expanded as the institution grew, with the addition of 3 independent directors brought on at Adi's insistence to improve governance, received the rumors through 2 of their members, who had each heard them from different sources, which created the appearance of organic concern rather than planted information. Board meetings followed, emergency sessions, the kind of tense, serious conversations that happen when a reputation-based business believes its reputation may be under attack. Sales slowed, not dramatically at first, but visibly. One corporate sponsor put their partnership on review. A London gallery contact sent a careful email asking about authentication procedures. Emeka in these board meetings was measured and concerned and professional. He expressed worry about the Foundation's reputation. He said, carefully and repeatedly, that the board needed to take decisive action to restore confidence. He suggested that strong leadership in this crisis required a clear face for the institution, a single, clear voice that the market and the media could trust. He was suggesting himself. He did not say it directly. He said it in the way of someone who is good at suggestion, around the edges, in the spaces between words, in the careful positioning of himself as capable and calm, while simultaneously positioning Adi's as the variable that the market was questioning. The board listened to him. Not all of them were convinced. Dr. Nwaisu's friend, one of the independent directors, a woman named Mrs. Chidinma Ez, who was a retired lawyer, watched Emeka's boardroom performances with the same quiet alertness that Dr. Nwaisu had applied at that Enugu dinner years before. She did not speak yet. She was watching. The crisis point came at a board meeting in February. 2 of the major institutional buyers had publicly paused their relationship with the Foundation pending clarification of the authentication concerns. The numbers, which had been excellent, were now declining. The board was anxious. The room had the specific energy of people who are afraid and looking for something to do about it. Emeka made his move. He presented a document, a restructuring proposal. Essentially, it argued that the Foundation's current governance structure was not suited to crisis management. It proposed that one person take operational control, with full authority to make decisions without the current shared governance model. It proposed, with all the language of professional inevitability, that this person should be him. Then he said the hardest part. He said that for the market confidence to be restored, the Foundation needed to demonstrate that it had addressed the sources of concern. And the sources of concern, the whispers, were connected to questions about curation. He said, without saying it, that Adi's role in curation was the thing that needed to change. Then he said the thing that he should not have said. The thing that, When he replayed it later, he could never find a way to make sound like anything other than what it was. He said, "I think, for the foundation to survive this moment, Adiz needs to step back from her operational role." The room was very quiet. Adiz was sitting at the opposite end of the conference table. She had been watching the presentation with the specific stillness of a person who is receiving information they are processing very carefully. She said, "Step back." "Temporarily," he said, "for the perception." "Emeka," she said. He looked at her. "You are asking me to step back from my own foundation," she said, not loudly. She was not loud. "From the institution I planned, that I funded, that I built. For the foundation's survival." "One more word," she said, "about the foundation's survival from someone who arrived here with talent and left everything else to me, and I will need the board to hear some things." The room was the specific quiet of people who understand that something much larger than the agenda item is happening. Two board members shifted in their seats. The third, Mrs. Chidinma Ez, the retired lawyer, was absolutely still and absolutely watchful. The vote happened. It was not a clean vote. Mrs. Ez abstained, saying she needed more information. One of the other directors voted with Emeka. The second voted with Adiz. With the board split, the casting structure of the governance documents gave the majority shareholder the deciding voice in cases of impasse. Emeka had not read this provision carefully enough. But in the heat of the room, in the disorder of the moment, this provision was not invoked cleanly. Adiz, shocked, genuinely shocked at the scale of what her husband had done, at the public and professional nature of the betrayal, made an error. She let the emotion of the moment carry her out of the room. She left. Emeka took the silence as confirmation of his position. He began acting as though the outcome had been resolved in his favor. He sent communications to the foundation's partners and sponsors. He had meetings with the institutional buyers. He presented himself as the operational head. The foundation's letterhead was updated with his name as director. Adiz went home to her parents' Enugu house because Victoria Island, the apartment she had shared with Emeka, was a space she could not currently occupy. Her mother met her at the door and she said nothing for a moment, and then she said, "He did it." Her mother said, "Your father will make calls." "No," Adiz said, "not yet. I need to do this myself." She spent 2 weeks in Enugu. Not recovering, she was not a person who needed long recovery periods. She was a person who processed quickly and moved. She spent 2 weeks reading every document the foundation had ever generated. Every incorporation document, every board resolution, every shareholder agreement, every piece of correspondence that had been filed. She found what she had known she would find. The original incorporation documents, the ones signed before the foundation opened, the ones that she had drafted with her family's lawyers, the ones that established the ownership structure with clarity. Those documents said, in language that was not ambiguous or interpretable, that Adiz Chisom Nwasu held 70% of the Osi Nwasu Art Foundation, and that this ownership conferred majority governance rights, including the right to appoint and remove directors, including the right to determine operational leadership, including the right, in cases where the minority shareholder had taken actions that contradicted the interests of the majority owner, to take remedial action. She also found, because she was thorough and because she had been reading carefully for 2 weeks, a series of financial transactions that she did not immediately understand. Payments to a consulting account that she had not authorized, small amounts individually, a pattern collectively. She called Mrs. Ez. "Chidinma," she said, "I need to talk to you." "I know," Mrs. Ez said. "I've been waiting for your call." They met in Lagos. Adiz laid the documents on the table between them, the incorporation papers, the financial transactions, the timeline she had constructed, working backward from the first whispers to their probable origin. Mrs. Ez read everything with the careful attention of a lawyer who has spent 30 years reading documents. When she finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He paid someone to start the rumors." "I believe so," Adiz said. "I cannot prove the specific person yet, but the payments are there and the timeline is there and the conclusion is not complicated." "He was trying to take your institution," Mrs. Ez said. "He was trying to take my institution," Adiz said, "using the institution's reputation as the weapon, creating a crisis he could solve by removing me. And his 30% stake gives him no authority to do any of this." "No authority," Adiz confirmed. "He is a minority shareholder. He has a seat at the table. He does not have the table." Mrs. Ez looked at her. "You're going back," she said. "Tomorrow," Adiz said. She called her lawyers that night. She called her family's lawyers in Enugu. She called a litigation firm in Lagos. She spent the night on the phone, and by morning she had a legal team assembled and a plan for the following day that was, in its architecture, the product of 2 weeks of reading and 30 years of watching her father build things carefully. The next morning, she arrived at the foundation. She did not arrive alone. She arrived with her lawyers. She arrived with Mrs. Ez, who had agreed to call an emergency board meeting, which, as a board member, she had the right to do. She arrived with printed copies of every document she needed, and with a calmness that was not the calmness of someone who was uncertain, but the calmness of someone who knows the outcome. Emeka was in the director's office, his name now on the door, when his assistant told him there was an emergency board meeting called for that morning. He came to the boardroom. He saw Adiz. He saw the lawyers. He saw Mrs. Ez at the head of the table. He understood. The meeting took 4 hours. Mrs. Ez ran it with the precision of a 30-year legal career applied to the specific task of dismantling a wrongful assumption of authority. She presented the incorporation documents. She presented the governance provisions. She presented the financial transaction records. She presented the timeline. She did not accuse dramatically. She simply laid the facts on the table in order and let the facts be what they were. The other 2 board members who had participated in the original vote based on an incomplete understanding of the governance structure sat with the documents in front of them and understood, progressively and completely, what had actually happened. Emeka had his lawyers. They argued. The arguments were not nothing. They had found provisions and angles that required response. But the original documents were clear. The 70% was clear. The governance rights were clear. When the legal argument was fully explored and the responses fully given, Mrs. Ez called the formal vote. On the question of operational authority, Adiz Nwasu, as 70% shareholder, had the determining voice. On the question of Emeka Osai's fitness to remain in a leadership position, given the conflict of interest identified, the board voted 3-0, with Emeka abstaining because he was the subject of the vote, to remove him from any operational role. The foundation was hers. She had never stopped owning it. Emeka sat in the boardroom after the meeting ended. His lawyers were gathering their papers. The other board members were leaving. Adiz was speaking quietly with Mrs. Ez at the far end of the table. He sat very still. He thought about the circular flat, the staircase light, his father at the canvas and his mother with her alterations, and the specific hunger he had carried for so long. He thought about the 8-year-old at the window looking at shoes. He thought about everything he had wanted and what he had done to try to get it. He thought, I had it. He had had it. He had had 30% of something remarkable, which had been growing into a number that would have been, over a career, extraordinary. He had had a wife who loved him genuinely and completely. He had had a platform for his art that the best artists in Nigeria would have given anything for. He had thrown all of it away. Not because it was not enough. It was enough. It was more than enough. He had thrown it away because the hunger that had been formed in the cerular flat, the hunger that was supposed to be the fuel that was supposed to drive him, had instead consumed him, had told him that 70-30 was unfair, had told him he deserved the whole thing, had drowned out every other voice, including the voice that would have reminded him that he was not the founder, that he had arrived with talent and been given an opportunity that he had not created. He sat in the boardroom and he thought, I had it and I threw it away. The divorce was filed within a month of the board meeting. Adiz filed it. Not from anger, she had processed the anger in the 2 weeks in Enugu. She filed it because the marriage had been, in the way that mattered most, already over. Not because he had not loved her at all, she believed, and would always believe, that somewhere in the arrangement he had made himself feel for her something real. But because love built partly on strategy is not the foundation that a marriage needs, and she understood this with the clear eye of a woman who had stopped hopping the calculation was wrong. She was gracious in the divorce proceedings. She did not pursue punitive financial remedies that her lawyers said she could have pursued given the documented financial misconduct. She allowed him to retain the Victoria Island apartment, which she had purchased, which he had been living in, as a settlement. She allowed him to sell his 30% share back to the foundation at fair market value, which gave him a significant lump sum. She gave him more than she was required to give him. She did this not because she owed him it, but because she had decided that the way you finished things said as much about you as the way you started them. And she intended to finish this the way she had started everything in her life, with clarity and without malice. He took the settlement. He sold the shares. He walked away from the Os Yenwasu Art Foundation with money and with nothing else. He had plans. Of course he had plans. He was Emeka Osai. He always had plans. The plans had been his constant companion since he was 12 years old with a paintbrush and a large idea. He was going to start his own gallery, his own institution. He had his name, his talent, the money from the share sale. He was going to build something that was entirely his. He did not build it. He tried. He found a space smaller than the foundation, in a less prominent location but serviceable. He lined up artists he knew from YABATCH and from the art world he had been moving in. He tried to build a program. But the art world in Lagos was not large, and the art world in Lagos knew what had happened. Not everything, not the specific details of the financial manipulation, but enough. The story of the boardroom had circulated. The story of what had happened at the foundation had circulated. The art world was a world built on trust and authenticity, and he had damaged both, visibly, in the most important professional relationship of his life. Collectors did not come. Buyers who had bought work at the foundation were not interested in the new gallery. Corporate sponsors who had received his approach calls were politely unavailable. The international contacts, the London Gallery, the New York Collector, who had built their relationship with Emeka through the foundation, did not extend that relationship to a new entity. He spent the settlement money keeping the gallery open. After 8 months, he closed it. He went back to painting, pure painting, no institution, just the canvas. He sold work through other galleries, the way artists who do not have their own platform sell work. The fees were modest. The exposure was not what the foundation had provided. He was talented. His talent had not changed. The talent was real and remained real. But talent without platform is a different proposition from talent with one. He moved out of the Victoria Island apartment. The building's running costs were more than his income could support. He found a place in Lekki, decent, smaller, not Victoria Island. He called his parents occasionally. His mother was careful on these calls, warm, because she was his mother and warmth was what she had, but careful, because she had not understood everything that happened, and what she had understood she had not processed fully. His father was quieter than usual on these calls. His father, who had spent 40 years navigating the specific difficulties of making art without commercial success, who had never made a compromise of the kind his son had made, was quiet in the way of a person who does not know how to say the difficult thing and does not want to leave it unsaid. He did not say it. Emeka did not ask him to. They had a conversation once, one conversation, on a Sunday afternoon when Emeka had driven to Surulere to visit, and they had sat in the small flat, the same flat with the same walls, the staircase light still not working after all these years, and his father had said, "Do you understand what happened?" "Yes," Emeka said. "Tell me." He told his father, not everything but enough, the plan, the whispers, the boardroom, the things he had done and why he had done them and what they had cost. His father listened without interrupting. When Emeka was done, his father was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "You wanted to not end up like me." Emeka looked at him. "Yes," he said, after a moment, "I'm sorry." His father shook his head. "Don't apologize for wanting more than I had. That's a reasonable thing to want. Apologize for how you tried to get it." "I know," Emeka said. "The how," his father said, "is everything. The how is the thing that you carry with you, and the how you chose is going to be very heavy to carry." He was right. It was very heavy to carry. On the other side of the story, Adiz moved forward with the speed and focus of someone who has been briefly interrupted, and is returning to a trajectory that was always hers. She reorganized the foundation's governance. She brought in a new artist-in-residence program. The anchor artist structure she had originally built around Emeka was replaced with a rotating program of 3 to 5 artists annually, which was, she concluded, a more sustainable model anyway. It diversified the foundation's artistic identity and reduced the risk that any one artist's departure could destabilize the institution. She hired a new creative director, a woman named Amara Dyke, 32, who had spent 6 years at a major London gallery and who brought international credibility and network that proved immediately valuable. She took the foundation to Abuja, as originally planned, then to Port Harcourt, then in a partnership that took 2 years to develop, and that was the most significant thing the foundation had done yet, to London, a joint exhibition program with a major gallery in East London that gave Nigerian artists access to the international market in a way that had never existed before. She was, in the years after the divorce, more successful than she had been during the marriage. This was not ironic. It was the predictable result of someone who had always been the builder operating without the weight of a relationship that was partly parasitic. She was not bitter. This also was not ironic. She had her father's pragmatism and her mother's warmth and 30 years of understanding that the goal was always the institution, the work. The thing being built, not the particular people who came and went in the building of it. She met someone in the 3rd year after the divorce. His name was Kemi Ademi. He was 31. He was a sculptor, a genuine one, not in the art world in a professional sense yet, working in a studio outside Lagos while holding a day job at an architecture firm. He was not famous. He had no platform. He had talent that was recognizable to anyone who looked at his work with proper attention, and a quality that Adiz had developed over years of looking at art and artists, the ability to assess. The quality of someone who was doing the work because it was the true thing, not because of what the work might produce. She found his work through Amara, who had attended a group exhibition in Ikeja and had sent her photographs with the note, "Come and see this. I think it's what we've been looking for." She went, she saw the work, she met the artist. He was quiet in the way that some very talented people are quiet, not performing modesty, genuinely absorbed in what he was doing, and therefore not particularly concerned with how he was being received. He showed her through the studio with the unself-consciousness of someone who was simply in his own space. He talked about the work with the directness of someone who had thought about it a great deal and knew what he thought. She offered him the residency program. He said he would think about it. He thought about it for 1 week, and then he accepted. He came to the foundation. His work was different from Emeka's, quieter in some ways, more interested in material and texture than in color and expressiveness, but with a depth that revealed itself over time. The collectors who came to his first foundation exhibition were initially unsure. After 20 minutes in the room, they were not unsure. He sold everything. The foundation held an opening dinner after his first major exhibition. Adiz was at the head of the table of the foundation's board, the patrons, the artists, the people who had built this world together. Kemi was beside her. He was not performing anything. He was simply there, present, genuine, interested in the conversations happening around him. He asked questions. He listened to the answers. He made observations that were funny without trying to be funny and insightful without performing insight. She looked at him at one point across the table and she thought, this is what it was supposed to look like. Not the dinner, the being beside someone, the not having to wonder what the calculation was, the simple fact of being next to a person who was there because they wanted to be there and for no other reason. She was right that this was what it was supposed to look like. They were married 2 years later, a smaller wedding than her first. She had no interest in scale for its own sake. The people who mattered, the art that mattered, the simple ceremony of two people choosing each other with full information. Kemi moved into the foundation's world not as its anchor but as its partner, as the person who made work that the foundation showed, as one of several artists rather than the definitive one, which suited him because he had no interest in being anyone's anchor. He wanted to make sculpture and have it seen by people who were ready to see it. The foundation gave him that. He gave the foundation his work. It was a fair exchange between people who understood what exchange was. Her father came to the wedding. He sat in the front row and he watched his daughter marry this quiet, steady, talented man, and he felt not relief exactly, though there was some relief, something more complete than relief. The feeling of watching someone find their way to what was right for them, not despite everything that had happened but partly because of it. After the ceremony, he found Kemi. "I am a doctor," he said to his new son-in-law. "I read people." "Yes, sir," Kemi said. "You are the right person," Dr. Nwasu said, not as a compliment, as a diagnostic conclusion. "I'll do my best," Kemi said. "Yes," Dr. Nwasu said, "I can see that you will." On the other side of the city, that same evening, Emeka Osai was in his Lekki apartment. He was painting. He painted every day. It was the thing that remained, the thing that could not be taken, that he had not been able to destroy even in all his destruction of everything else. His talent was still his. The work was still real. He sold it through a gallery whose owner was fair and professional, and who asked no questions about the foundation or the marriage or any of it. He had enough to live, not the Victoria Island life, the Lekki life, sufficient, not abundant. He was 29 years old and he was sitting in his apartment with a canvas in front of him, and the specific feeling of someone who had been somewhere very high, and had come down very hard, and who was learning, slowly and without anyone to guide him through it, how to live with the choices they had made. He thought about his father sometimes, about the circular flat in the staircase light, about what his father had said on the Sunday afternoon, the how is everything, the how is the thing you carry. He thought about Adiz, not with longing, not anymore, that had passed, with something that was harder to name. Something that was partly regret and partly a specific kind of grief for a version of his life that had been possible and that he had unmade. He thought about what it had cost him. The money, he had money still modestly. The apartment, the one he had lost and the one he had now. The platform, the institution, the name in the international art world all gone, or reduced to something much smaller than it had been. The marriage gone. The version of his future where the hunger was satisfied gone, because you cannot satisfy hunger with theft, and what he had done was a kind of theft, a theft of something that was not his. He thought about what might have been. If he had accepted the 30% as what it was, an extraordinary gift, a foundation built on someone else's capital and his own talent, a fair exchange that would have compounded over 20 years into something remarkable. If he had loved Adiz the way she loved him, fully, without calculation, with the specific surrender that real love requires, if he had been patient, if he had trusted that his talent, in the right institution, with the right support, would produce the life he had always wanted. He had had the right institution. He had had the right support. He had not been patient. He had not trusted. He painted. The canvas in front of him was a view from his Lekki window, the street below, the buildings across, the particular quality of Lagos evening light. He was painting it honestly, with all his skill and all his attention, the way his father had always painted, because the painting was the true thing. Because the work was what remained when everything else changed. The painting was good. It was, in some ways, better than the work he had made when he was riding the foundation's energy and success. It had a different quality now, quieter, more interior, less concerned with impression and more concerned with truth. The galleries that showed it said this. The collectors who bought it said this. He was becoming, in the Lekki apartment with the modest income and the daily hours at the canvas, something he had always been capable of becoming and that the hunger had prevented, a real artist. Not an artist with a platform, not an artist with a strategy, an artist who made work because the work was what he was. His father visited sometimes. They sat in the apartment, smaller than the circular flat in some ways, bigger in others, and his father looked at the paintings on the walls and did not say much about the other things and talked mostly about the work. The work was good, they both knew it. "Papa," Emeka said one evening, "did you regret it, the art career, the taxi, the alterations, all of it?" His father was quiet for a long time. "No," he said finally. "I made things that I believed in. I didn't compromise them. That's not a regret." Even with the money. Even with the money. His father paused. "The money would have been better. I'm not going to pretend. But I didn't do the wrong things to get it, and I can live with what I did." Emeka looked at his father. "I did the wrong things," he said. "I know," his father said. "I can't live with what I did as easily as I thought I would be able to." "No," his father said. "You can't, that's the cost." They sat with this for a while. "But you can make things," his father said. "You can still make things, and the things you make are good. That doesn't go away just because you made bad choices around it." "Is that enough?" Emeka said. His father looked at him. "It's what you have," he said. "Make it enough." There is an art museum in Lagos. It has 3 locations now: Victoria Island, Abuja, Port Harcourt, and a 4th coming in London that will be the international flagship, the bridge that was the original vision, the thing that the person who built it planned when she was 17 years old and saw the gap between where Nigerian art was and where it deserved to be. The museum is called the Os Yenwasu Art Foundation. The name has not changed. It will not change. Not because the Osa is still relevant in the way it was at the beginning. It is not. The man behind that name has no operational role and has not had one for years. But because the name was part of the story of what was built, and the person who built it is not interested in erasing history. She is interested in building. In the Victoria Island location on the ground floor there is a permanent collection. Among the pieces in the permanent collection are 14 paintings from the Foundation's opening exhibition, the first work, the paintings that launched the institution. They are beautiful paintings. They are, on their own terms, remarkable work. They are by Emeka Osai. She kept them. Not sentimentally, she is not a sentimental person. She kept them because they are genuinely important to the Foundation's history and because art does not become less true because of what the artist later does. The paintings are what they are. The story of how they came to be here is complicated. Both things can be true. The man who made them is in Lekki. He paints every day. He is 30 years old. His work has evolved into something that people who follow his trajectory find compelling, not the commercially strategic work of the foundation years, but something quieter and more honest. He is building a reputation slowly as an artist who makes real work. It is slower than he wanted. It is less than he had, but it is his. He drives past the Victoria Island location sometimes. He does not stop. He does not need to. He knows what is inside. On the other side of the story, the foundation continues to grow. The woman who built it is 31 years old, and she is running an institution that is changing what the international art world understands about Nigerian art. She is doing this with a creative director who understands the work, with a board that governs properly, with an artist-in-residence program that is producing the next generation of West African artists with international reach. And she comes home every evening to a quiet studio attached to the house where her husband is working on something in metal and clay, patient, absorbed, present in the work the way he is always present in everything. They eat dinner. They talk about what each of them is building. They are building different things, and the different things are compatible, and the compatibility is the foundation of something that both of them understand without discussing it at length is real. This is the story of what greed costs. Not in the movie version of cost, not the dramatic single moment of loss. In the real version, the slow version, the version where you make a calculation that seems correct and find out over years that the calculation missed the most important variable. The variable was everything he already had. He had talent that was real. He had an institution that was growing. He had a woman who loved him completely. He had 30% of something that was becoming extraordinary, which would have compounded, which would have built, which would have produced the life he wanted. He had it, and he threw it away trying to take something that was never his. If this story sounds like something you know, if it sounds like a calculation you have made or are making, let it land. Let it land properly. The how is everything. The how is the thing you carry. Build the right way. Take your time. Trust that what you build with your hands honestly is worth more in every accounting that matters than what you take from someone else. The paintings are in a museum that belongs to someone else. But the canvas on his easel right now, that one is his. That one nobody can take. This has been Tribal Tales Hub. If this story made you think, if it made you examine something in your own life, your own choices, your own relationship to what you have and what you want, like this video, one click, that is how you tell us to keep telling stories like this one. Subscribe to Tribal Tales Hub. Hit the notification bell. Every story, every notification, because the stories we bring you are the ones that stay. Comment below. What is the most important thing you have right now that you should not take for granted? Tell us. The comment section is a place for real things. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. You know who that person is. Send it to them today. This is Tribal Tales Hub. We will see you in the next story.